Hey everyone, Scott here to discuss Sisu, starring Yorma Tomila, Jack Doolan, and Axel Henny, directed by Halmari Herlander. Now, I have seen this movie before in theaters, and I'm curious about The Road to Revenge, but first let's go through this movie and then we'll see if The Road to Revenge will work out. Let's get into it. We start with the definition of the word Sisu, as it's a Finnish word, and by Finnish I mean Finland. As we move on, we open the movie in late 1944, and the Finns make a treaty with the Soviet Union, and that aggression between them will cease if they will remove their former German allies, called the Nazis, and from Finland. As this conflict is in the middle of the Lapland War, and the Nazis are forced to retaliate against the Finns, which makes sense as that actually happened in real life. But remember, this movie is fiction, as well as we meet a retired commando and prospector named Atami Korpi, played by Jorma Tomila, whom I don't know as an actor, as his credits on IMDb, according to IMDb, I mean, but I haven't seen any of his work. But he was actually really good, as he has no dialogue until the very end of the movie, and I'll get there when I get there. And that was a very smart move by him, as he's a badass. And director Halmari Herlander, who does a good job with this movie as an action movie during World War II, as a Tommy finds some gold in the ground and walks a very long way, to get some bills from the gold, as we'll learn also at the end of the movie, as that starts with chapter 1, which is called The Gold. Like I said, he finds the gold, and we move on to chapter 2, and with a Tommy walking a very long way to get the bank to go to the bank for bills, until he gets encountered by the Nazis. And the cinematography was actually pretty good, believe it or not. After the Nazis pick on Tommy and try to kill his dog after getting away from the Nazis, Tommy kills some of the Nazis. And when I first saw the trailer for this, as soon as that knife goes into the Nazi's head, someone in the audience said out loud, "Oh shit," because it came out of the fucking blue. And the action sequences were entertaining, as I was entertained, which makes this an entertaining movie, in my opinion. And we get introduced to German officer Bruno, while Atami gets away, and we move to chapter 3 as Atami gets his gold back, as he gets encountered by Bruno and his fellow Nazis, and they try to kill Atami, but he blows up some grenades as he shields himself from getting killed until they cease fire, and Atami escapes with Bruno's Nazis, as there's a few of them, after Tommy, but he blows each of them up. And that was kind of a cool sequence, and the Nazis send a few women they have hostages to look in front to see where Tommy is at. And then we move on to chapter 4, as director Halmari Herlander does a good job with making this movie a World War II action film. And after Sisu Road to Revenge, he's making a prequel to John Rambo. And we'll see how that goes. But the editing was very tight, like there was no time to waste, and I admire that about the movie. We get the backstory of Tommy, as that worked here in the beginning by the 30-minute mark, more than Now You See Me 3, which I reviewed recently, where it was mentioned about 45 minutes into the movie, as it was more earned here than in that movie. And the Nazis refuse to walk away from Tommy, as they're losing the war while Tommy is on the ground, and the dog does find him and runs away, while the Nazis, with their dogs, look for Tommy as he slips under one of the cars and hides there and breaks their engine and gets gasoline pouring on him, and Tommy gets out of underneath the car and escapes, while the Nazis send their dogs after him, and they're too scared to get him because he puts himself on fire and jumps into a lake. And Bruno sends some Nazis on the lake to get Tommy, but he kills every single fucking last one of them, and he eventually gets out of the water to only get to the other side, as he rides on the boat and gets to shore. And Tommy's dog approaches the Nazis, and they use the dog for bait, which will come up later in the movie. And I thought, oh God, please no, please don't kill his doggy, as far as the scene is, as And as for the scene, it's shot quite good, and I'm enjoying myself watching the movie from start to finish. Chapter 5 comes, and I'm thinking, am I in a Quentin Tarantino movie because of the chapters? Which could make sense, as I was getting vibes from Inglorious Bastards. As Atami rests for a bit while he hears a baby crying in his head until the dog comes in to him with dynamite, as he takes it off the dog and throws it, but not on time, as it blows up and knocks him the fuck out. But it doesn't kill the dog, thank God, with the Nazis catching him, and they hang him until he finds a way to breathe by standing on a nail, not completely in, which did feel a little unrealistic, but I went with it, as this is so far a pretty good, decent movie. Next day comes, and a couple of men come by plane and see Atami, as when the plane goes by, he gets on the ground and is released from being hung, as two men find him and the dog and almost kill them both until Tommy strikes one of them men with a knife on the foot. And another nitpick is when sometimes when they were speaking English, it almost felt like their lips weren't in sync, which did kind of bother me. And then we move on to Tommy stitching himself and continues to fight Nazis as they stopped in the middle of the road, as Bruno wants them to move the plane, blocking their way. As this is so far a decent yet good movie in my opinion. As Bruno tries to go around the plane, we go to the women back being held hostage by the Nazis, which didn't feel too necessary, but it fills in the 90 minutes this movie is, as one of the women named Aino, I think that's how you spell it. It's spelled like Aino. Smiles and explains about a Sisu coming after the Nazis and won't give up until Tommy kills the motherfuckers dead, as it'll make him stronger. And until Tommy appears and takes a Nazi gun at first, but he decides to give it to Aino. And we move on to chapter 6, which will be all about the killing of the Nazis, as Tommy gets to work with Aino, while she drives the Nazi truck, and eventually Tommy gets on their tank, and their women help Tommy and Aino kill off the motherfucking Nazis, while the tank continues to keep moving as they fight off Tommy. But they don't kill him, but Tommy kills one of the Nazis and gets underground and steals the Nazi bike, and that was kind of amusing, as they just get up and run away. And the women kill off the Nazi off. Tommy fought off against another just to finish him off. While the action scenes were badass in a pretty cool way, Bruno gets on the plane without the tank driver, as Bruno kills him off and gets on the plane, while Tommy gets on the plane while it takes off, and Tommy gets inside the plane while the pilot is injured, and Bruno fights Tommy off, and Tommy wins the fight by sending Bruno to die in a torpedo, exploding on him, and he shouts, "Fuck you!" to Tommy, and the pilot dies while the plane crashes, as well as, surprisingly, Tommy survives the crash, which is again unrealistic, and the women catch up to the other Finns, telling them they killed the last bit of Nazis in their Avenger, while approaching them with the tank. And the final chapter comes, and Tommy is alive and his gold, and walks to a city where he goes by a bank and delivers the gold, and speaks Finnish by saying, "Make these into big bills." And the climax was action-packed and badass, but does it make it a decent good movie? Let's talk about it in a rating. I'll give this movie a 7.3 out of 10. The acting is actually pretty good in this movie, as Jorma Tomila does a good job at portraying a silent badass, while director Hjalmari Herlander does a good job with this as an action movie during World War II. I don't know both of those names after Sisu and Road to Revenge. Hjalmari Herlander will do a prequel to John Rambo without Sylvester Stallone, and we'll see how that goes when it gets made. The action sequences are entertaining, as the movie entertained me from the entire 91 minutes as it was entertaining. The cinematography is, believe it or not, actually very good, and the editing was very tight, like there was no time to waste. And I admire that about the movie. while knowing Tommy as a character in the 30-minute mark was much better than, say, in Now You See Me 3, which I reviewed recently, that took place where it took place in the 45-minute mark, which felt unearned, but here it's earned, as it is shot very good, as I'm enjoying myself watching this movie from start to finish. The chapters come up on screen and I'm thinking, am I watching a Quentin Tarantino movie? Which could make sense, as this movie works as a ripoff of Inglourious Bastards, as I really liked Inglourious Bastards, and I was getting vibes from that movie, as it's a recommendation for the movie. But a few minor nitpicks I had with it. When Tommy hangs and he steps on a nail and that makes him breathe was unrealistic. But when I went with it, as this was a decent, good movie. And the other is when they spoke English, the lips didn't feel in sync. And the third, the story about the women wasn't necessary, but it fills up the part of the 90 minutes of the running length, and it doesn't waste too much time, and if that makes sense. And overall, it was a pretty good movie by the end of it, as well as very entertaining. So I'd like to thank you guys for joining me, and next time we'll be back with Sisu Road to Revenge. And until then, I'm a stubborn motherfucker.